Okay, so this is the fourth day of the program. I hope that you are not completely exhausted and you don't want to talk about comics anymore. Today we have two experts of comics. One is the head of the library of Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée et de l'Image. On the left side of your screen, if you have the same screen as I do, and on the right side, the head of the Museum of Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée et de l'Image, exactly. Actually, it's interesting because you see that the Cité is a very complex and very rich center. You had a talk or a discussion with Pierre Longaretti, the head of Cité Internationale. But now you can see that Cité is really developing a lot of activities. Heritage is very important, actually. And the museum is one of the richest in Europe, maybe the richest. I don't know. You will tell us.
The richest.
And the library is very active and develops a lot of formats and innovation. And now we have finished the presentation. You know everything about library and museum, so it's over. Now you can explain in more details. What are your activities? Who is starting?
I can start.
Okay, excellent.
So I'm Samuel Lévesque, and my job is to run the library of comics in the Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée. And as it was said, it's one of the biggest comics collection in the world, the second biggest collection of comics in the world. And the library itself, it's divided into three parts: a public library when people can come, work, and borrow comics; a research center, which is dedicated to research on comics for students and scholars who want to work on comics; and the historical fund, Fonds Patrimonial, where we keep collections of comics, maybe forever, and our oldest comics in the bookshelves are about 180 years. So we have a lot and a lot of comics, about 200,000 comics in the library. And I'm also at the head of the mediation, cultural mediation service. So we do a lot of animations and workshops with kids, especially to learn about comic culture and to entertain them all along the year. So that's all about it with me. Hélène, can you present yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Anne-Hélène Hoog. I'm the director and the curator of the Museum for Comics here at the Cité Internationale. And to express it very shortly, I would say this is the biggest collection in Europe, and it's the second largest collection in the world. The first one being in the Ohio State University, the Billy Island Library and Museum, which started the collection a very long time ago. We started this collection about in the 70s, in fact, in the course of the Festival of Comics, which was taking place and starting there as the first Festival of Comics happening in France. It was about 1973, and we enlarged gradually the collection because first artists were offering works and drawings, original works to the city of Angoulême. So our collection, which is around now 16,000 original pieces regarding drawings, covers a very broad aspect and spectrum of the collection, especially North American collection and North American comics, and Belgian and French comics as well. So these were the main points. The museum covers about over 1,750 square meters, and includes two spaces for temporary exhibitions, which gather, one is about 400 square meters and the other one is about 250 square meters, which gives us quite a lot of possibilities regarding exhibitions, regarding the thematics of exhibitions, and also we have in this very broad permanent exhibition, which is ours at the moment, we have about 400 exhibits shown there, mixing original works and printed works. Just as a precision, as I mentioned already in the video we filmed, exhibiting paper is a very delicate matter because papers have to be renewed and changed every 3 months. You cannot let them under the light over 3 months, and when they have been 3 months on display, then you have to keep them, to put them back in the magazine, in the depot, for about 3 years. So having a very large collection enables us to do that. And another aspect is that a collection is always lacking. A collection is a permanent development process. The other aspect of our activities are temporary exhibition, and we can come to this with your questions later. Thank you.
I just want to add something. Hélène is perfectly right when she says paper is a fragile matter, because in the public library, we saw that comics that people can borrow are endommaged really quickly. They get bad really quickly, and those ones which are conserved in the historical fund, they are like new, even if we bought them 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, this is one point with comics, with papers. Especially is that comics are printed mainly on very cheap paper. And I don't speak about the albums, I speak about comic books, and I speak about newspapers.
They don't like
moist, the sunny pages. So
they dislike everything.
Not only it's very fragile, but when people bought them, they didn't intend necessarily to keep them. So we are very close to the situation of the popular imagery, where you have a lot of works which were printed and which we have lost tracks from. That means we cannot, our collection aims at saving, rescuing this heritage, this witnessing of artistic activity and creation, about which a lot of it is like an ocean, you know, has been disappearing, and we have just kept the sea, I would say. So it is really a process of gathering everything you can find about it in order to restitute, to recreate for the public a historiography of the art, a history of the art of comics, which is covering quite a large domain. And we are now aiming at collecting also Asian works from Japan, Korea, China, and other countries. Also Arabic-speaking comics, which are a very interesting trend, as we show in a previous exhibition here. And all kinds of comics which are also in India or other places, which are trying to experiment the possibilities of formats and discourse.
We have a double technology problem because in one hand, comics have been printed on very cheap paper, and on the other hand, if we look at, for example, Korea now, they don't print comics anymore. It tends to disappear and to become digital only. So these are both very different but very complementary challenge for us to keep track of all of this. Yes. I don't know. Do you have questions about the videos or on our jobs? Don't hesitate to ask us. Yes?
Yes, I'm Gregory from Japan.
Yes.
And I have one question about copyrights.
Yes.
Because I'm a collectioner of original, BD originals. And in Japan, we're thinking about, but not Japan, but for my city, small city, I'm thinking about just to show the original to the students in the Alliance Française. And when you bought original in gallery, they say you don't own the copyrights of the originals, so you can't make money with it. And I'm thinking about when you do exposition, even for free exposition. Yes, I can contact the author, and I know, but some author I never met. How do you? What I'm supposed to do? Do I have to ask the author? Do you have to ask the authorization? Do I have to contact the editor to ask the copyrights to just show the originals?
Yes, in any case, you have to have the authorization. In any case, you have to request, and it's the printer, the editor, who will be able, first of all, because he has the rights. He's the one who has the rights. The author has a moral right, but on an original work, even if you want to show it, the possibility of showing it, the rights regarding this part of the use of the work is reserved for the editor and for the author. So if the editor is not agreeing, you cannot do that because the editor bought it somehow.
Especially in Japan, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You have it in your collection, but having the original work doesn't mean that you have the rights to print it and reproduce it. If you want to show it in an exhibition, it's not a problem. The problem is if you want to communicate about it, if you want to reproduce an image of it in a catalog or in any sort of publication regarding your exhibition, you have to ask for the authorization.
Yeah, and I think it may vary but I think Japan has very, very strict laws about copyright. So you really have to have the express authorization from the editor. But they often are okay with that, but they are not okay if you don't ask them.
Yeah, I understand what you're meaning. Yeah, but in Japan, it's more copyright is very strict.
Yes.
For the Japanese author, when it's some foreign author, is just more a little bit free. But this is not the point. Okay, thank you for the answer.
Yeah. Do you have other questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask a question. I mean, two questions, but I'll start just with one. Samuel Évêque, do you have a kind of data bank of the videos related to graphic novels and comics which are available so that we can share them with the public? Because well, there's a huge work to be done to introduce the readership abroad, in India in my case, to the Franco-Belgium production. And well, we cannot unfortunately buy all the and distribute all the comics and graphic novel, or to import the Angoulême library in India. So videos online is a fairly handy way to share it even with art schools. So do you have such kind of data bank or catalog or list?
Yes, we do. Toi, c'est peut-être un peu plus, t'es là depuis plus longtemps, je sais pas si...
On me répond pour le fond des collections numériques parce que je pense que c'est ça qu'il a aidé sur les fonds vidéo.
We have a lot of things on the website of on the Cité de la bande dessinée. We have digital collections which have a lot of pages of comics. The periodicals, and also we have a YouTube channel with a lot of content, author interviews, we have conferences, We have a lot of interventions. Hélène did a virtual tour into the museum. That's something we don't have a lot of video on the website, but that's something we want to develop a lot since this year and since the lockdown and everything, because we realized we didn't have enough of this, and that's something we are often asked. But if you go on the website and the digital collections, you will see that we have already a lot of things. We also began to do digital workshops every Wednesday 3 months ago to show to everyone that you can do a workshop, you can learn to draw, you can learn to reproduce a character or to invent a superhero, monster, heroine, everything. You can do it like about from your home with your kids, etc. And you will find all of this on our website and on our YouTube channel.
Artist interviews.
Yes, and there's also artist interviews which have been done by Sébastien from the New Factory, which is the place when we organize a lot of things with authors. Do you want to add something, Hélène?
Yeah, regarding films, we do have quite a large corpus of authors' interview films, which start because they were started very early in the history of the city, which is now 30 years old. So some of them are not in a very good state, but we will digitalize all this in order to set it online. And the aspect about original collection and digitalizing is quite problematic, because of course we can digitalize anything. The thing is we cannot publish it because we have to have the agreement. So the only things you can find on our sites regarding the original works collection of the museum, the original drawings and so on, are mainly those who are free of rights, and that means they are over 70 years old, so you can use them. And those for which we have specific authorization from the editor and the author.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have a policy for digital only comics, like webtoons or some others production which are only online and never printed?
As a matter of fact, at the library, just before the lockdown, we were thinking about doing a comics exhibition, a digital comics exhibition at the beginning of next year. But the lockdown pushed back our calendar. But that's something which is new for us, because historically the Cité de la Bande Dessinée didn't look at this type of collection. But now we have to think a way of integrate those collections. And the first step for us is to pull back together the editors of digital comics and do an exhibition all together, us, but with the editors. And I think this exhibition, it will bring together editors and push them to give us copies of those collections, because it's on the internet, so you can find it. But if the editors goes bankrupt and disappear, the collections disappear with it. And we saw those days there's a legal claim against the Internet Archive, if you know that, yeah. Which reminds us that nothing is eternal,
permanent.
So we have to find ways to copy that. But we are just on the beginning of this policy.
Yes, curating digital material is quite a challenge.
Yes.
Because first of all, we have to be aware that the technical support is not really the medium to carry those digitalized images, or native digital images, is fading away very quickly. That is, we have to you know, the principle of a museum or the notion of heritage is to keep for thousands of years, I would say, you know. Is there something like old Egypt comics, for example? Can we be sure that in 1,000 years we will have still track from that? We don't know, and this is really the challenge. The second challenge is the volatility of the market and the fact that authors do not necessarily earn their living with publishing on the net. So they tend to come back sometimes to paper and print and drawing on paper. But some authors are really exclusively on the digital support, on the digital basis. And for this reason, they are, I would say, thriving. At the same time, they are extremely popular because you can access them from anywhere in the world. And at the same time, the whole question of how do you deal with this material, how do you deal with the format, how can you find the right support to read the comics is still a quest we have to close. So this is certainly a point where the future will tell, and everybody at the moment is quite perplexed on this matter. One institution is extremely forward with this. It is the Comacon in Bucheon, because they started at a very early stage, they started to collect digital material. And for this reason, they have a huge amount of digital material, and you can have access to it through their site.
I think our institutions have a moral responsibility to go forward in this direction, because if we don't do it, the market of comics and digital comics will move on. And I have an example. Recently, Marvel Comics, all the superheroes, they launched a commercial offer like Netflix, but for comics, which called Marvel Archive, I think, when you can you can read all of which have been published by Marvel, like for a century. And it's great, but it's a commercial offer. You have to pay it. It's not preservation. They can remove like they want, all they want. So if museums and comic libraries don't have a parallel policy to preserve very precious material, even digital material, it will remain in the hands of a few big companies, which point is to sell it. And not to transmit it to researchers, students, people who can't access comics, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it doesn't sell, it doesn't stay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common good, so it should be public and open access. So, yeah.
Je sais pas si on a d'autres questions.
I think that there were two more questions. Daniel wanted to ask something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much. So I have two questions for you. The first one is, so I'm representing a festival in Valencia in Spain.
Yeah.
The question is, I'm very interested in building a net for sharing exhibitions, for example, also other efforts, because I think every festival makes a big effort making one exhibition for some days, and then it vanishes. And I think it's a pity because maybe not for Angoulême or for Barcelona, who are main venues, but for little ones like the Valencia one, for example, we have around 20,000 visitors for every edition. For us, it's a big effort. So the question is it possible to ask you for sharing some exhibitions, maybe in digital is also a possibility, or to establish some kind of contact? Is there an email which you can share with us so that we can try to find ways of interchanging or keeping updated, because maybe we make very local exhibitions, also from a historical point of view, not only modern also, but also historical one. And maybe it could be useful for you also, or other events. Is there, so I know it is a lot of things I'm saying now. The first one is if there is the possibility for asking you for some exhibitions, and then if there is an email. And then the second one, for a perfect future, I would like to have a kind of point that could coordinate this kind of exhibitions for all the venues in Europe. It could be a dream for me. And then the second one is what is the sense of showing, as a curator, of showing digital works? I mean, not digital comics, but digital originals. Because you know, the most part of the authors right now work on digital. They don't paint anymore. So what is the sense of showing a print of a previous thing that at the end ends in a book? Thank you.
Yeah, this is a huge point. First of all, we are working on a catalog. We are developing our catalog of digital exhibition, virtual exhibition. And sometimes we do them, we build them quasi on demand, on the request, but we do have some which can be sold and circulated. And we do now try to make digital version of every exhibition we create here. It doesn't mean that it's free. It doesn't mean that it doesn't cost anything. For example, the exhibition of about Arabic comics, Arab comics, or comics in Arab countries today is circulating, or was circulated by the Institut Français quite largely. We have other exhibitions about Francophonie or French-speaking, which are also circulating. But the fact is that we should try now, regarding the situation of many structures, we should try to offer this possibility. So we are ready to speak about it with whoever is interested, so that we could enlarge our catalog, develop our catalog, and answer to the needs also regarding the cultural activities and comics in everywhere else. The second point now, digital works. Yeah, the thing is, how can you say it's an exhibition? Under which form it could be an exhibition if you have digital works? They are made to be read on small formats, you know, like phone and tablets and so on computer screens. And we do have very few tracks of how they were made. That means the creating process, which is an interesting part, if you look at the work of an artist, is not necessarily there. And we have the case here for the Château des Animaux, the Castle of the Animals, by Delep and Dorisson, which is really a good example, because Delep, the draughtsman, the artist, did a few drawings on paper, but mainly, and the drawings he likes were made directly on the per computer. Yeah. So we do alternate, and I showed some of it in the film we made. We do alternate original works, paper works, and the digital print. And the question of the digital print, it's not a work of art as such, because a work of art is on the computer. It's a print, it's an expression of the work. But you cannot compare it necessarily to a copper, a copper plate or engraving and so on. It's a completely different process nowadays. The paper quality is depends very much on your financial means to print it. So I would say it is interesting if you make a use of it as a visual and work on the image itself. I don't think that you have necessarily to look for original if they are not, but you have to find a way to enhance the work of the artist through the display of his drawings, you know. And for this, you have to always think, as I said, the eye of the beholder. It's the one you have to think instead of the public. You have to be in the eyes of the public and offer them something which will speak a lot, volumes about the work of the artist. It compensates the fact that you don't have sketches, that you don't have, you know, first prints and first coloring and the black and white and then the pencil, etc., etc. You have a complete freedom to deal with comics. This is also what we can appreciate. And according to how much money you have, you can deal with it. This is why small venues for festivals can be very inventive and very creative when it comes to dealing with the words. I've seen that many times. So I think it's always a proposition, an artistic proposition.
I think there to add just a little detail, but when you do an exhibition with digital arts in it, it can be very useful to the visitor, to your public, to see the artist doing it, because very few people know how to draw on a computer. It seems obvious, but it's not. How does an artist work with a graphic tablet and with which softwares, and how is set his workplace, etc. So you can find ways to just have not the picture, but also the procession of the creation of this digital piece. A few years ago, I was in Japan and I saw the Miraikan, the Museum of Future, which is something very fascinating because it's a very positive and a bit new age museum dealing with science. But there was an exhibition of digital paintings. It was like 5 years ago, and they found ways to show, but just not a picture printed from a computer, but they were explaining how it was different from a traditional painting, traditional drawing, things the eye can see, things the eye can't see, etc. So Hélène is perfectly right. You have all rights to make settings to lure the people, to attract them and to fascinate them with printed comics or digital comics. I think David had a question. Your mic is off. You have to activate your microphone.
My God, you have good eyes.
Yes.
That's such a good sight. I believe it.
Yes. I think it's okay.
I have to put on my glasses to see it.
Yes, hi. I'm still watching the video Nicolas did, but I'd like to ask a question. I work in Alliance Française at Caracas, and there is the collection we have a Mediathek there, and the collection we have. Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, okay. And the collection we have there is specifically of bande dessinée classics.
Yes.
I mean, bande dessinée franco-belge. And I'd like to ask because I've seen that there is a lot of effort in talking about new tendencies of BD, and I'd like to ask what recommendations can you give me on the issue of mediation of activities BD classics. Maybe they are not the newest BD, but we have the classics, and we'd like to know how to work with it, because sometimes it seems too easy to find activities to do with new BD than with older BD, such as Tantan, Shrooms, and that's the collection we have mostly in Venezuela. Because on the other hand, there is a difficulty. I think a partner in India talked about it. In Venezuela, it's a bit hard to find the novelty, the things, the novel things, to import them. It's difficult. So what we have is a font that is a classic on PDF font. What do you think about it? What recommendation can you give us? Thank you.
I think one of the greatest things with classic Franco-Belge comics, that's the authors like from Asterix, Tintin, etc. They invented the proportion of the comics heroes. So if you learn to draw Asterix and you ask kids or people want to draw to draw Asterix or Achille Talon or Tintin, they will learn a lot of things with the proportion. And something we experimented a lot in our workshops. But kids come, they want to draw anything but classic comics. But you can say them, okay, let's draw classic comics. Let's decompose what makes those characters, like Tintin with his hair, with his bizarre trousers, etc. And then from that, you can say to them, no, you have seen how to decompose a character. You have seen that Obelix is huge, Asterix is so small, etc. And now you can analyze what makes a character of comics, what makes an action in comics. And then you can say to people who wants mediation, wants to learn to draw, wants to have activities around comics, to use these classic works to invent new stories. If you can't have access to new stories, new BD and new tendencies, you can go from old comics to say to people, so invent it, assimilate the codes of classic comics to invent new heroes. What do you want to see in a hero? What is your dream character? Represent yourself as a superhero. I think you can go from how those drawings were made to invent the codes of tomorrow. I don't know if I'm really clear, but I think the analysis of those drawings to invent new characters is a good approach to people on workshops.
Thank you.
Maybe I could add something, because we tried last year to organize, well, we did not try, we did organize workshops for kids, and actually the best way to catch their interest is just to let them meet a professional artist who will explain by himself how he works and which comics he likes, which classicals, which new ones, and this way there's a direct contact with the makers of this art. So even if they talk about Smurfs or Asterix, they will make the bound with their own comic culture, and that's probably the most efficient way to reach the kids and to make them well, to get their interest for this media. So
yeah, and you want to see.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I would say the hardest task is not necessarily to learn how to draw comics. You know, I mean, in Poland you have a huge, great tradition of caricature. So it's the same for Germany, it's the same for most of the countries. A lot of countries have excellent examples about how you draw, how you can draw, and those models. I think where the hang of comics is that you have to make it stand on one page or one or three cases, or you have to make a story. You have to tell a story. You have to tell it with words or without words, but you have to tell a story. It's a narrative work. So if you see the way Harvey Pickard, for example, worked with Robert Crumb for American Splendor, he was, first of all, he was doing the synopsis, he was doing the scenario, and then the artist would come and give it its whole, this full development of situation, but it was always a connection with something, because there is a storytelling, and the drawing and the text, if there is a text, do work together in order to make this stand. And I think for a child, learning how to draw, it's learning expression, it's learning how to deal with the visual, but it's also learning how to organize space, how to deal with space, and how to deal with telling on one page or 10 pages, telling a story. And I think the awareness that they want to say something should maybe come first, because they can always learn how to draw. Lewis Trondheim said he didn't know how to draw, And if you see some artists, they say, oh, drawing is not so important. They make this, Jochen Gerner or others, they can do this. If you look at the way they learned, they were excellent draughtsmen. They would do great works. Gottlieb would do great works. They all know perfectly well how to draw, but they chose to go away from this, exactly according to what we said about the visual codes and how to create your own, to express to find your own self, to find your own style in it. But whatever you do, if you don't have a story to tell, then you have the problem, you understand? Because the idea of the educational work, es ist eine Selbstbildung, it's a formation. It is something which is helping you to get out of, to get farther. And drawing is helping you to tell your story farther, to bring it farther.
And a lot of comics authors, they say very similar things. It's very often when they were kids, they were copying a lot. They were watching TV, cartoons, and reading comics, and they were copying it. So you totally can ask kids your favorite characters, and even if you don't have the material here, you can say to them, draw, I don't know, Son Goku, Thor, Captain Marvel, whatever. Because kids, they will have a dinosaur and Son Goku and Asterix, and they will have an adventure together and whatever. They will invent stories, but you have to guide them to make them create stories, understand the code of how is the story, how unfolds the comics, because it's something which is learned. It's not spontaneous. A lot of people which have never read comics in their life, they don't know how to read a comic strip or to read a comic page. But there's something, like Ian said, the quality of the drawing, the nature of the character is not so important than to learn to tell a story. And you can ask them, what story do you want to tell? What story do you want to show your comrades or people on the workshop? And it will come naturally.
Thank you.
I had maybe a question still. First of all, thank you very much for the videos. It was very interesting. I was really impressed, and it looked to me a little bit like a Paradise on Earth. I just wanted to ask first if it's really like that, to whom I shall send my references to work there. These kinds of things, and just to finish about these workshops, something that is working very, very well with children, to make them take a comic book in their hands for the first time, is the serial Petit Poilu. I don't know how it's called in English. It's Kleiner Struwel in German. And it's just a comic where well, I don't know if maybe all of you know it here, because we are well among professionals, but well, the drawing is very simple and the stories are very expressive for children.
We have an exhibition there. We have an exhibition.
Oh, wonderful. So just send it to us throughout the world. It's it works very good in the Bibliothe. So when we have now in Łódź, in the Alliance Française, we have 2,000 comic books, and the children, when they still don't speak French, they are a little bit scared about taking any books. So we just give them Petit Poilu first, and then they are sitting there for hours. So that's just kind of magic. So
yes, Petit Poilu is a really good first comics, because there's no text, and textless comics, it's a very good first approach on comics, because you don't have to read the language, you just have to learn how to watch the different pages and how unfold the stories. Yes.
So, is the Cité Internationale de la BD really paradise on earth, or?
Not all the time, but it's a really interesting place to work. Yes.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge, yes. Because we have a lot of different entities, but we are not 2,000 people. So we have to learn to do a lot of things ourselves. So it's very good, because we learn things all the time. And we have a very beautiful place to work.
And never forget, we have to remember that, to remind us of this all the time. We are dealing with popular culture in the best meaning of it. You know, we are dealing with a medium which could speak to anybody if anybody wants to pay attention, and it's at the same time it has a great mobility, because it has evolved tremendously in the last decade, tremendously. And now you have a variety, a diversification, which is huge, which you can reach to all sorts of aspects of human life through comics. And it's not only a way to do pedagogic and education and so on. It's also a way to speak about thousands of aspects of life without having much to explain. You know, comics are something so rich in itself that I see artists now who are really dealing with contemporary graphic arts, including comics, including painting, sculpture, film, photography, etc. And now a lot of artists mix this, you know, together. They get influence from the movies, they get influence from photography, and photography does get influence from comics. You find the same characters, you find the same situation. So this is now a whole communication tool where artists speak from pop art to abstract art, etc. They speak about images and telling about life. And this awareness is very great by, among artists today. So authors of comics are always do very often aspire to deal with society and use more and more all sorts of mediums. It still doesn't mean that comics is not a very special field of it, but it means that it can enrich other fields and it can take from them. And this is the way you can also, when you exhibit or when you do a course of how to draw comics, never forget that artists have been in museum, they have read newspapers, they have looked at photographs, they have been in the movie halls, they have watched TV, they have listened to music, and this allows you to make a world much more richer and to communicate better with the people, the public you want to talk with, you know, because it's all connected today.
And I think we don't have to forget that even in France, which is one of the great country of comics in the world, like 50 years ago, it was not an institutional art like it can be now. It was not even considered as a valid popular culture. It was for kids, and
And for
kids and for idiots, like at the time of our parents. So it's a really recent
illiterate people. You know, they would really think this is the lowest of the lowest in the culture.
Like in the 50s, we had senators in France who said when the first comics goes into libraries, senators in the French Assembly say that it's a deaf culture. It's a culture which preaches immorality, and kids who were reading comics, they were going to jail and to be lost forever. And now we have a huge comics festival in Angoulême, which is visited by the President of the Republic, and it's the same Republic.
Yeah.
It's very recent, so
it's a huge
development.
It's a huge step.
It's a huge step.
I've heard similar speeches in Germany 5 years ago, so just like the old senator 50 years ago in France. So that's there's still a lot to do in other countries. And well, in Poland right now, in which we have the biggest comic festival. You probably know the organizer. It's been 30 years now. That's they have this festival, and now it started in a small room in the school, and then now it's in a sport arena. So for scores, for 10,000 people coming each year. And now the newest development is that they will open next year, or maybe, I don't know if they have delay now through the virus. They will open the International Center for Narrative Arts. So that's getting more serious, and the comic scene is maybe in Poland, it's not so developed, like not so popular like in France, but the people who are working on it, it's really high level, and they really mean it seriously, and that's the future of Polish culture. Well, I'm quite positive it will be very interesting next year what will happen there.
I think it's important that countries who want to develop a comic culture do both kind of festival and exhibition, etc. Because comics is still a fragile culture. Like Hélène was saying, comics are fragile by nature because the paper is fragile. And we have saw this in history. There are countries which had a strong comic culture, like in the Balkans, and this culture disappeared in the 90s. Because of the war, because of there were no museums, there were no public library with comic collections, and now young artists in those countries are struggling to recreate a market for comics, which is and this market has not to be completely owned by American comics and manga. You have to have a national culture of comics to have a lively market. So. Both things can disappear, so we have to take care of it. So,
I think we could take maybe a last question, but that would have to be quick because we have another session at 3. Is there a last question? Just talk if you know, or maybe we'll just end this session, and maybe we could ask a last question. Is it, can you trust the senator? Given to what you've said, what the political field have been really evolving in France, like in the 20 last years. How do you feel? Has it to evolve again? Or we are at the top now in France in terms of recognition?
I think the problem which is in France now, but we saw in the United States both last weeks when it's a question which is everywhere. Comics is now, I think, legitimate cultural field, but a lot of authors are struggling and don't have enough financial recognition of their work. It's not a question that I will have an answer the definitive answer today because it's an infinitely complex problem. But we have in France a lot of people who work a lot. We publish 3-4 books a year, and they almost not make a living of it. So I think one of the main problems today is not that comics is in danger of being delegitimate. I think it's now, for a majority of the population, it's a valid art, and it's the ninth art, and with a museum, with several museums in Europe. So I think this won't go back, but how of this huge production of comics you make stable and viable financial activity or economic activity for the people who are struggling to live with their comics, even if they sell a lot and they have a lot of few money in return. It's a very complex question, but I think that's the field the editorial market has to improve in the next few years.
Thank you very much. We are going to warmly thank Anne-Hélène Hoog and Samuel Lévesque for this moment, and the videos as well, because it's been appreciated a lot. And I will just say to the French Cultural Network, we are meeting almost right now in 5-10 minutes for the last session of the day. And see you, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the chance.
Enjoy
nice
comics
day.
and enjoy your life with
come to see us in Angoulême.
Yes, come to see us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Merci.